Okay, so let's set the scene. I want you to picture the world right after the 2008 financial crisis. Regulators are digging through the wreckage and they start to realize that the entire global financial system is running on this hidden layer of technology that, frankly, nobody really understands. They were determined to drag it all into the light, and what they uncovered, well, it was going to change banking forever.
Now imagine a super tense boardroom. You've got the bank's bigwigs from the risk committee on one side of the table and a federal regulator on the other. And the regulator asks this incredibly simple question. How many models are you running? And the silence that follows is just deafening. You can just picture it, right? People are shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact. Because the truth is, nobody in that room actually knows the answer. And that one missing answer revealed a massive, terrifying, and completely uncontrolled risk sitting right at the heart of the bank.
And look, this wasn't some isolated incident at one bank. This was a crisis across the entire industry. As regulators dug deeper after the meltdown, they found that these huge banks were operating on thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of different financial models. These models were doing everything from deciding who gets a mortgage to trying to predict the next market crash. And almost none of them were being properly tracked, inventoried, or monitored.
It was, for lack of a better term, the Wild West. You'd have one department with its critical models running on some random spreadsheets, another with its own siloed systems, and absolutely no central oversight. This chaos meant that the people at the very top had no real idea what their institution's total risk exposure looked like. They were flying completely blind. And the 2008 crisis was the proof of just how unbelievably dangerous that was.
And listen, we're not talking about small-time, insignificant calculations here. We are talking about the absolute core engines of modern finance. You've got credit scoring models, which literally decide who can and can't buy a house. You've got stress testing models, which are supposed to be the fail-safe that predicts if a bank can even survive the next big crisis. And then liquidity forecasting, which is just making sure the bank has enough actual cash to operate tomorrow. The scale of this stuff was enormous, and the fact that nobody was really watching it was, well, it was staggering.
So something had to give. This level of chaos just couldn't continue. And this brings us to the big turning point. Regulators, led by the U.S. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, you'll hear them called the OCC, they finally stepped in. And they came with a very clear, very forceful mandate. Get your house in order. This wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a command.
So the OCC laid down the law with this new framework they called Model Risk Management, or MRM. The key phrase to focus on here is robust knowledge and control. See, this wasn't about just making a simple list of your models anymore. Oh no. Banks now had to prove they knew everything about them. Who built it, what data goes into it, how it's tested, who's responsible for it. It was a total revolution in accountability.
So what did the regulators actually want? It really boiled down to these three non-negotiable steps. First, you had to catalog every single model, no exceptions. Second, you had to document exactly what it does and validate it, meaning prove that it actually works correctly. And third, you had to continuously monitor these models to make sure they stayed accurate over time. This wasn't some one-and-done project. This was the new normal.
So put yourself in the bank's shoes for a second. How on earth are you supposed to manage thousands of these complex models, each with its own documentation, its own validation cycle, its own owner? You're not going to do that with emails and spreadsheets, that's for sure. This incredible regulatory pressure basically forced the entire banking industry to turn to technology, and specifically, it forced them to build really sophisticated, centralized databases. And this slide, I think, just lays out the transformation perfectly. On the left, you have the old way of doing things, a complete mess of scattered spreadsheets, ad hoc lists, and knowledge trapped in different departments. That was officially dead. The new mandate demanded what you see on the right, a single source of truth, a governed, centralized database that could provide a full, auditable history, the entire lineage, for every single model.
And these weren't just your standard databases either. They had to become incredibly powerful compliance tools. I mean, think about all the detailed metadata they had to track. They needed to store a model's underlying assumptions, its inputs and outputs, its complete history or lineage, all of its validation results, and even map out how all the different models depended on one another. It was a huge undertaking.
And this, right here, brings us to the real key takeaway of this whole story. The mandate didn't just create a new pile of paperwork. It fundamentally changed the way banks connected risk and technology.
It basically shifted the entire idea of governance from some abstract policy document into a concrete, auditable system. Policy, for all intents and purposes, became code.
This quote really just hits the nail on the head. What the OCC mandate truly revealed was that you can't manage risk if you don't manage the technology that's producing the numbers in the first place. The system itself, the database, the architecture, how the data flows, that became a primary tool for managing risk. Your trust in the numbers was now directly tied to your trust in the system that created them.
So ultimately, what we're looking at is this incredibly powerful shift. A regulatory policy written down on paper got translated directly into software and database architecture. All of a sudden, compliance wasn't just a job for lawyers and auditors anymore. It became a massive challenge for engineers and data architects. If you wanted to prove you were compliant, you had to be ready to show them your code.
It's pretty wild when you step back and think about it. This whole story, this entire technological revolution inside the world's biggest banks, it all started with one simple question in a boardroom. It just makes you wonder, if a government mandate could force the creation of these enormous data systems just to build trust in finance, where else are databases and data architecture quietly, silently becoming the real foundation of accountability in our world?